The sound of scales and arpeggios filled the hallways of Thornfield Music Academy every afternoon. Students hurried between practice rooms, sheet music clutched to their chests, eyes wide with a mixture of passion and fear. The fear wasn't of music itself, but of disappointing Professor Eleanor Winters. Eleanor stood beside the grand piano in Studio 1, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun that matched her tight expression. She tapped her wooden pointer against the music stand as her student, the governor's son, fumbled through a Chopin piece for the third time. "Thomas, you're not feeling the music," Eleanor said. Her voice clipped like the hedges outside the academy windows. "You're playing notes, not making music." Again from measure 16. Thomas, a boy of 16 with nervous fingers and expensive clothes, nodded and repositioned his hands. His shoulders hunched forward as he began again, the weight of Eleanor's expectations pressing down on him like a heavy coat. Outside the studio window, autumn leaves danced across the academy courtyard. Eleanor glanced at them briefly, remembering a time when music had made her feel that free. After 30 years of teaching, sometimes she forgot why she had fallen in love with the piano in the first place. These days her satisfaction came from molding young talents into competition winners, not from the joy of creation. "Better," she said when Thomas completed the passage, "but your left hand is still too heavy. Remember, Thomas, this competition could determine your entire future. Juilliard doesn't accept students who play Chopin like they're hammering nails." The lesson continued for another 30 minutes, each minute stretching like taffy for the young pianist. When it finally ended, Thomas gathered his things quickly, mumbling a polite goodbye before escaping into the hallway. Eleanor sighed as she organized her lesson notes. Thomas had talent, certainly, but lacked the fire that separated good pianists from great ones. Still, his parents were major donors to the academy, and his father's position as governor meant his success reflected well on her teaching reputation. As the afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows, Eleanor moved to her office to review applications for the upcoming scholarship auditions. The academy prided itself on occasionally accepting students from less fortunate backgrounds, though Eleanor privately thought talent rarely emerged from unstable environments. Structure and discipline were the foundations of musical excellence, after all. Her office was immaculate, every pencil aligned, every sheet of music filed in its proper place. The walls displayed framed photographs of former students on prestigious stages, all bearing the same serious expression Eleanor had taught them alongside proper hand positioning. At 6 o'clock, most of the academy emptied. Teachers packed up their metronomes and lesson plans. Students rushed home to practice or, for the less dedicated ones, to whatever distractions waited outside these hallowed walls. Eleanor remained, as she often did, working late into the evening. The only other people in the building at this hour were the night security guard, old Mr. Patterson, who dozed more than he patrolled, and the cleaning staff who arrived after lessons ended. Eleanor rarely noticed the cleaners. They moved through the academy like ghosts, dusting the busts of famous composers, polishing the brass nameplates on studio doors, emptying wastepaper baskets filled with crumpled sheet music and forgotten practice schedules. They were part of the building's machinery, necessary but invisible. Tonight, however, as Eleanor walked down the hall to retrieve a reference book from the library, she noticed someone new. A woman stood polishing the glass trophy case, her movements careful around the gleaming awards that Eleanor's students had accumulated over the years. The woman was small with dark hair tied back practically, wearing the standard uniform of the cleaning company. Nothing remarkable except for her hands. Eleanor had spent a lifetime studying hands, and these were pianist's hands, long-fingered, strong, with the distinctive muscle development in the forearms that came from years of keyboard work. Curious despite herself, Eleanor paused. "You're new," she said, not a question but an observation. The woman turned, startled. "Yes, ma'am. Started last week." Her English carried a slight accent that Eleanor couldn't quite place. "South American, perhaps. What's your name?" Eleanor asked, surprised at her own interest. "Sophia Mendez," the woman replied with a small smile. "I'm covering this building on Tuesdays and Thursdays now." Eleanor nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with this break in routine. She didn't typically chat with the cleaning staff. "Well, be careful with the instruments, please. The pianos in the practice rooms are very valuable." "Of course," Sophia replied, her smile fading slightly. "I understand." Something in her tone made Eleanor look more closely. Do you play? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Sophia hesitated, then gave a small shrug. Once, a long time ago, Eleanor almost asked more but stopped herself. What did it matter if this cleaner had taken piano lessons as a child? Many people had, then abandoned the instrument when they discovered how much work mastery required. Instead, she simply nodded and continued on her way to the library. The next few days passed in their usual rhythm of lessons, faculty meetings, and preparation for the upcoming fall recital. Eleanor's calendar was packed with commitments: judging a regional piano competition, attending a faculty development workshop, and preparing Thomas for his crucial audition. On Thursday evening, Eleanor was again working late, this time in the recital hall. She sat at her desk in the corner, reviewing programs for the donor gala scheduled for next month. The gala was a critical fundraising event, where wealthy patrons would be entertained by the Academy's most promising students. Every detail had to be perfect. The sound of a vacuum in the hallway reminded her that it was cleaning night again. She had nearly forgotten about the new cleaner, Sophia, until the woman herself appeared at the recital hall door, cleaning cart in tow. I'm sorry to disturb you. Professor Winters, Sophia said, her voice soft but clear. I can come back later if you're busy. Eleanor waved her in. No need, I'm just going over paperwork. You won't disturb me. Sophia nodded and began her work quietly, dusting the rows of chairs, careful not to make unnecessary noise. Eleanor tried to focus on her programs but found her attention drifting to the cleaner. There was something in the way Sophia moved around the room, her eyes occasionally lingering on the grand piano on the stage, that spoke of familiarity with such spaces. You said you played once, Eleanor said suddenly, breaking the silence. Where did you study? Sophia looked up, surprise crossing her face at being addressed. She paused in her dusting. In Caracas. Many years ago. Venezuela? Eleanor said, placing the accent now. The El Sistema program. Sophia's eyes widened slightly. Yes, how did you know? I've judged international competitions. Some of the Venezuelan students mentioned it. Eleanor set down her pen. That's a serious program. Why did you stop playing? A shadow passed over Sophia's face. She resumed her dusting, moving to another row of seats. Life happens, Professor. Sometimes we don't get to choose our path. The cryptic answer should have ended the conversation. Eleanor had papers to review and Sophia had floors to clean. Yet Eleanor found herself oddly dissatisfied with this response. In her experience, people who truly loved music never really stopped playing. They might take breaks, they might change directions, but the piano called them back eventually. There are practice rooms available to staff, Eleanor said, not entirely sure why she was offering this information. If you ever wanted to, keep your skills up. Sophia looked at her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Thank you. That's kind. The conversation ended there, both women returning to their tasks. But something had shifted in the atmosphere between them, a recognition of sorts, though neither could have explained exactly what had been recognized. As Eleanor gathered her things to leave an hour later, she noticed Sophia had moved on to other parts of the building. The recital hall was spotless, each chair perfectly aligned, the hardwood floor gleaming under the dim evening lights. On the stage, the grand piano stood majestic and silent, its lid closed like a sleeping eye. Eleanor ran her hand along its polished surface as she passed. Tomorrow it would come alive under the fingers of students and teachers. Music would once again fill this space, some of it brilliant, some merely competent, all of it striving toward that elusive perfection that had defined Eleanor's life. As she walked to her car in the nearly empty parking lot, Eleanor found herself wondering what kind of music Sofia Mendez might coax from those keys. What stories might be told by those hands that now held dusters and mops instead of bringing Chopin and Beethoven to life. The thought followed her home like an unresolved chord progression, waiting for its eventual resolution. Eleanor's week rushed by in a blur of lessons, administrative meetings, and preparation for the upcoming scholarship auditions. Fall was always the busiest season at Thornfield Music Academy. New students settling in, returning students preparing for winter competitions, and the constant pressure of maintaining the school's prestigious reputation. Friday evening arrived with a cool breeze that rustled the trees outside Eleanor's office window. Most of the faculty had left hours ago, but Eleanor remained, sorting through applications. The scholarship program was her pet project, though she would teal to never admit to such sentimentality. Each year, one talented but underprivileged student would receive full tuition, chance at the musical education Eleanor believed shaped not just careers but character. The clock on her wall showed nearly 9 as she filed the last application. Her back ached from sitting too long, a reminder that she wasn't as young as she once was. 30 years of teaching had slowly bent her posture into a permanent slight stoop, as if she were forever leaning toward a piano. Eleanor gathered her things, ready for the quiet drive home to her apartment, where leftover soup and a glass of red wine awaited. As she locked her office door, she noticed the hallway lights were dimmed for the evening. Mr. Patterson must have started his rounds, though the old security guard moved so slowly these days that his rounds took most of the night. She was halfway down the main staircase when she heard it, so faint at first she thought she might be imagining things. Music coming from the main recital hall. Eleanor paused, her hand on the polished wooden banister. The building should be empty except for her and the cleaning staff. Perhaps a student had stayed late to practice. But the recital hall was always locked after hours, the grand piano off limits except for performances and special lessons. The music grew clearer as she descended the remaining stairs. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of her favorite pieces, though she rarely admitted to having favorites. This wasn't the halting technical playing of a student. The notes flowed with a deep understanding of the emotional landscape beneath them, each phrase shaped with care and feeling. Eleanor followed the sound down the corridor, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting. The double doors to the recital hall were slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. She approached quietly and peered through the gap. Sofia Mendez sat at the grand piano, her cleaning cart abandoned in the corner of the room. The woman's eyes were closed, her body swaying gently with the music as her fingers caressed the keys. She wore the plain uniform of the cleaning company, but her posture at the piano transformed her completely. Back straight yet relaxed, wrists flowing, fingers moving with precision and grace. Eleanor stood transfixed as Sofia reached a particularly challenging passage, one that even her advanced students struggled with, and played through it with flawless technique. The emotional depth she brought to the piece was something that couldn't be taught, only felt and understood. For a moment, Eleanor forgot her position as the Academy's strictest teacher. She forgot the rules about authorized personnel and proper procedures. She simply listened, captivated by the beauty flowing from Sofia's hands. Then reality rushed back. This woman, this cleaner, was using the Academy's prized instrument without permission. The Steinway grand piano in the recital hall was worth more than most people's homes. It was tuned weekly, maintained meticulously, reserved for concerts and master classes, not for cleaning staff to play after hours. Eleanor pushed the door open fully. The sudden movement caught Sofia's attention, and her hands froze mid-phrase. The abrupt silence felt like a physical thing, heavy and uncomfortable in the large room. "What do you think you're doing?" Eleanor's voice echoed against the wood-paneled walls. Sofia stood quickly, nearly knocking over the piano bench. Her face flushed dark with embarrassment as she stepped away from the instrument. "Professor Winters, I'm sorry, You were just what? Using equipment you have no authorization to touch?" Eleanor stepped further into the room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. "This piano is worth over $100,000. It's not here for the entertainment of the cleaning staff." Sofia's face fell, the joy that had animated her features moments before now replaced with shame. "I meant no disrespect. The door was unlocked and You were hired to clean this academy, not to play its instruments," Eleanor interrupted, her tone cold and precise. "These pianos require special care. They're for the use of qualified musicians and students who've earned the privilege." The words hung in the air between them. Sofia's hands, those capable, musical hands that had brought such beauty to the Chopin piece minutes before, now hung limply at her sides. "Stick to what you were hired for, cleaning, and nothing else," Eleanor finished, gesturing toward the abandoned cleaning cart. "And make sure you lock up properly when you leave." Sofia nodded, her eyes downcast. "Yes, Professor. It won't happen again." She moved to her cart, shoulders hunched, and began gathering her supplies. Eleanor stood by the piano, watching as Sophia quickly finished wiping down the last row of seats. The woman's movements were efficient but mechanical now, all the grace she'd shown at the keyboard gone from her body. A twinge of something, not quite guilt. Perhaps discomfort passed through Eleanor. She'd done nothing wrong, she told herself. Rules existed for good reasons. The Academy's instruments weren't community property. Still, as Sophia wheeled her cart toward the door, Eleanor found herself saying, "You've had classical training." It wasn't a question, but Sophia paused and looked back. "Yes, a long time ago. Your technique is still there, but your pedaling is heavy in places. The middle section needs more restraint." The words came automatically as if Sophia were one of her students. A flicker of something, pride perhaps, or defiance, passed across Sophia's face. "The acoustics in this hall are different from what I'm used to. The pedal responds differently." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, surprised by the technical knowledge in this response. "And what are you used to?" Sophia hesitated, then straightened slightly. "The Bosendorfer at the Caracas Philharmonic. That was my reference point for many years. The Bosendorfer, one of the world's finest pianos with a distinctly different action and tone from the Steinway. Not the kind of instrument a casual player would know, let alone use as a reference. You played with the Caracas Philharmonic?" Eleanor couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "I should finish my work," Sophia replied, her tone suddenly formal. She turned away, pushing her cart toward the exit. At the door, she paused again. "I apologize for the intrusion, Professor Winters. It was unprofessional of me." Then she was gone, the soft squeak of the cart wheels fading down the corridor. Eleanor stood alone in the recital hall, troubled by the exchange in ways she couldn't quite define. She walked to the piano and sat on the bench where Sophia had been. The keys were still warm. She placed her own hands on them but didn't press down. After a moment, she closed the lid gently and stood. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. Eleanor found herself replaying Sophia's performance in her mind. The woman clearly had formal training, extensive training. The way she'd handled the difficult middle section of the nocturne spoke of years of serious study. Yet here she was, cleaning floors at a music academy instead of playing on stage. "Life happens," Sophia had said when asked why she stopped playing. What had happened in her life? Eleanor pushed the thoughts away as she heated her soup. She had more important concerns: Thomas's upcoming audition, the scholarship applications, next month's donor gala. The mystery of a cleaning woman with concert pianist skills wasn't her problem. But that night, as she lay in bed, the haunting notes of Chopin's Nocturne played in Eleanor's mind, performed by hands that now scrubbed floors and polished trophy cases. The following week brought tense encounters whenever Eleanor and Sophia crossed paths in the academy hallways. Sophia kept her eyes down, no longer offering the friendly smile she once had. She worked quickly and quietly, making herself as invisible as possible. Eleanor told herself this was proper, professional boundaries maintained. Yet she found herself watching Sophia's hands as the woman dusted the portraits in the main corridor, wondering about their history. During her Thursday afternoon faculty meeting, Eleanor's attention drifted from the budget discussion when the academy director, Paul Chen, brought up an unexpected problem. "I'm afraid Andrea Kim has come down with pneumonia and won't be able to accompany the performances at next week's donor gala," Paul announced, looking concerned. "We need to find a replacement pianist quickly." Andrea had been the Academy's accompanist for years, reliable, skilled, and familiar with all the pieces the students would be performing. The gala was the biggest fundraising event of the year, with wealthy donors expecting polished performances. "What about William from the jazz department?" suggested one of the younger teachers. Paul shook his head. "He's in New York that weekend for a competition. I've called several local pianists, but it's such short notice and the program is challenging." Eleanor listened as her colleagues proposed and rejected various solutions. The pieces selected for the gala included difficult works by Rachmaninoff, Saint-Saëns, and Paganini, not something just any pianist could sight-read successfully. As the discussion continued, Eleanor found herself thinking of Sophia's flawless performance of the Chopin Nocturne. Before she could think better of it, she cleared her throat. "I might know someone," she said, surprised by her own words, "but I'd need to verify their capabilities first." All eyes in the faculty meeting turned to Eleanor. She rarely offered solutions to problems outside her direct responsibility, and she never volunteered unknown persons for academy events. "Someone you know?" Paul asked, his surprise evident. Eleanor hesitated, already regretting her impulsive statement. "Not exactly. I need to verify." "Their abilities first," she repeated, unwilling to explain further in front of everyone. "Give me until tomorrow." After the meeting ended, Eleanor sat alone in her office, questioning her own judgment. Why had she spoken up? Sofia Mendez was a cleaning woman who happened to play piano. Playing one Chopin piece well didn't qualify someone to accompany advanced students at a donor gala, yet the memory of Sofia's playing lingered. There had been something in her technique, her musical understanding, that went beyond mere talent. Eleanor had taught long enough to recognize the difference between someone who played notes correctly and someone who understood music on a deeper level. With a sigh, Eleanor pulled her laptop closer and typed "Sofia Mendez, pianist, Venezuela" into the search engine. She felt slightly ridiculous, like a detective investigating a case nobody had asked her to solve. The first few results were irrelevant. Social media profiles of various Sofia Mendezes, none of whom appeared to be her cleaner. Then, on the second page of results, a link to an old newspaper article caught her eye. "Young Venezuelan pianists shine at international competition." The article, dated 15 years earlier, mentioned several promising musicians from Venezuela's El Sistema program. Among them, Sofia Mendez, described as a rising star whose interpretation of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 earned her the silver medal. Eleanor clicked further, finding a few more mentions in music reviews from South American publications. Then the trail seemed to go cold around 8 years ago. Nothing more recent about a pianist named Sofia Mendez. Curious now, Eleanor refined her search. On a classical music archive site, she found what she was looking for. A video labeled "Sofia Mendez with the Caracas Philharmonic, 2015. The video quality wasn't great, but there was no mistaking the woman at the grand piano. A younger Sofia, her hair longer and styled elegantly, wearing a formal black gown, sat confidently at a Bosendorfer concert grand. The orchestra behind her waited as she positioned her hands, then launched into Rachmaninoff's demanding concerto. Eleanor watched, transfixed. Sofia's playing was magnificent, technically flawless but also deeply expressive. Her hands moved across the keyboard with the assurance of someone who had mastered her craft through thousands of hours of dedicated practice. This was no amateur who had taken lessons as a child. This was a professional concert pianist at the height of her powers. The video ended too soon, capturing only the first movement of the concerto. Eleanor sat back in her chair, trying to reconcile the elegant, confident woman in the video with the quiet cleaner who now pushed a cart through Thornfield Academy's hallways. What had happened in those 8 years? How did someone go from performing with a professional orchestra to cleaning floors? The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the academy earlier than usual. She knew Sofia worked the early shift on Fridays, starting before most teachers arrived. Sure enough, as Eleanor walked through the main entrance, she spotted Sofia mopping the marble floor of the lobby. "Ms. Mendez," Eleanor called, her voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Sofia looked up, surprise and wariness crossing her face. "Of course, Professor Winters." She set her mop aside and approached, keeping a respectful distance. Eleanor found herself uncharacteristically hesitant. "I saw some videos of your performances." With the Caracas Philharmonic, Sofia's expression froze. For a moment she seemed unable to respond. Then she gave a small nod. "That was a long time ago. You were very good," Eleanor said, the understatement feeling awkward on her tongue. "More than good, actually." "Thank you." Sofia's voice was barely audible. Eleanor straightened her shoulders, falling back on formality to navigate this uncomfortable conversation. "Our accompanist for the donor gala has fallen ill. The event is next Friday evening. The program includes Rachmaninoff, Saint-Saëns, and Paganini, accompanying our advanced students. Would you be interested in auditioning for the position? It pays, of course." Sofia's eyes widened. She looked down at her uniform, then back at Eleanor, as if to highlight the absurdity of the situation. "You want me to play at your gala? After telling me to stick to cleaning?" The direct reference to their unpleasant encounter made Eleanor wince internally, though she kept her expression neutral. "I may have been," Hasty in my judgment. Your playing suggests you're more than qualified. Sophia didn't respond immediately. She glanced toward her cleaning cart, then out the tall windows where morning light was beginning to strengthen. I haven't performed publicly in 8 years, Professor Winters. May I ask why? The question was personal, perhaps too personal, but Eleanor needed to understand. Sophia looked at her for a long moment, seeming to weigh how much to share. When did you last read news from Venezuela? I'm not particularly political, Eleanor admitted. Neither was I, Sophia said with a sad smile. But in my country, eventually politics finds everyone. My father was a university professor who spoke against the government. When they came for him, my mother and I had to leave quickly. We had 10 minutes to pack. I took my music scores and little else. She paused, her gaze distant. We came here as refugees. My mother's health was poor, the stress, you understand. My music degrees weren't recognized. I needed work, any work. By the time things stabilized, years had passed. Pianos are expensive to even rent. Practice spaces cost money. Music became a luxury I couldn't afford. Eleanor listened, a new understanding dawning. She had spent her life in music, but always with the privilege of access, to instruments, to education, to opportunities. She had never had to choose between playing piano and putting food on the table. I'm sorry, Eleanor said, the words inadequate but sincere. Sophia shrugged slightly. Life happens, as I told you before. I was luckier than many. We got out safely. My mother received medical care here. I found work, and now I get to be around music every day, even if I'm just cleaning the rooms where it happens. The dignity in Sophia's voice struck Eleanor deeply. There was no self-pity, just a simple acknowledgement of reality. The position for the gala includes access to the practice rooms this week, Eleanor said. The pay is modest, but it might be a start, if you're interested. Something flickered in Sophia's eyes, a spark of the passion Eleanor had seen when she played the Chopin piece. The program? Do you have it? Eleanor pulled a folder from her bag and handed it over. Sophia opened it, her eyes scanning the music selections with professional focus. Challenging pieces, she murmured, but nothing I haven't played before. She closed the folder and looked up at Eleanor. When would you like me to audition? Now, if you have time, Eleanor said. The recital hall should be empty until 9. 20 minutes later, after Sophia had informed her supervisor she was taking her break early, they stood in the recital hall. Sophia had washed her hands and removed her work apron, but still wore her cleaner's uniform as she sat at the grand piano. Any particular piece you'd like me to start with? She asked, her hands hovering over the keys. The Rachmaninoff, Eleanor said. It's the most difficult for the student who will be performing. Sophia nodded and began to play. The powerful chords of Rachmaninoff filled the room, her fingers finding their old confidence with each passing measure. Eleanor watched, once again struck by the transformation. In her uniform, with her cleaning cart waiting in the hallway, Sophia Mendez disappeared. In her place was an artist, drawing beauty from ivory and strings with the skill of someone born to the task. When she finished the piece, Sophia looked up questioningly. The Saint-Saëns, Eleanor said, her voice slightly hoarse. From the beginning, please. Sophia played through all the gala selections with barely a mistake, despite not having touched a piano regularly in years. When she finished the final piece, silence filled the hall for several seconds. Well? Sophia asked quietly. Eleanor cleared her throat. I'll need to speak with Director Chen, but I believe we've found our accompanist. A smile broke across Sophia's face, the first genuine, unguarded smile Eleanor had seen from her. Thank you for this opportunity. Don't thank me, Eleanor said honestly. We need someone of your caliber. It's a professional engagement, nothing more. Yet as they walked back to the lobby, Eleanor found herself wondering if it could be something more, not just for Sophia, but for the academy, and perhaps for herself as well. She had spent decades teaching talented students, but it had been years since she'd been truly surprised by anyone's playing. There was something refreshing about rediscovering that music could still move her. The rehearsals will start this afternoon, Eleanor said as they reached the lobby. 3 o'clock in Studio 2. Can you arrange your schedule? Sophia nodded. I'll speak with my supervisor. Thank you, Professor Winters. As Sophia returned to her cleaning cart, Eleanor watched her go with mixed emotions. She had done a practical thing, found a qualified accompanist for an important event. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just set something larger in motion, something that might change more than just the donor gala program. Word spread quickly through Thornfield Music Academy that the cleaning lady would be accompanying the students at the donor gala. By lunchtime, curious faculty members found reasons to pass by Studio 2, where Sophia was scheduled to rehearse with Thomas, the governor's son. That afternoon, Eleanor arrived early to prepare the studio. She arranged the music stands, adjusted the piano bench, and checked that the Steinway had been properly tuned that morning. These were tasks she normally left to others, but today felt different. She wanted everything to be perfect, though she couldn't quite explain why she cared so much. At 10 minutes to 3, Thomas arrived, his violin case clutched tightly in his hand. "Professor Winters," he said with a nervous nod. "I heard about the new accompanist." "Ms. Mendez is highly qualified," Eleanor said firmly. "You'll be in good hands for the gala." Thomas looked doubtful but knew better than to question Eleanor's decisions. He began unpacking his violin, rosening his bow with quick, anxious strokes. At precisely 3 o'clock, Sophia entered the studio. She had changed from her cleaning uniform into simple black pants and a blue blouse, still modest but more appropriate for a musician than a cleaner. Her hair was pulled back neatly and she carried a folder of sheet music under her arm. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady despite the curious stares from Thomas and 2 other faculty members who had lingered in the doorway. Eleanor made brief introductions. "Thomas will be performing the Rachmaninoff vocalese at the gala. Shall we begin?" Sophia nodded and took her place at the piano. She arranged the music carefully, took a moment to adjust the bench, then looked up at Thomas with a reassuring smile. "Whenever you're ready." Thomas positioned his violin, trying to mask his skepticism. He nodded once, and Sophia began the haunting introduction to the Rachmaninoff piece. Her touch was delicate but assured, creating the perfect foundation for Thomas's entry. When he began to play, Thomas's eyes widened slightly. Sophia's accompaniment supported his melody perfectly, following his tempo and phrasing with an intuitive understanding that made his playing sound better than it ever had before. When he hesitated slightly in a difficult passage, she adjusted seamlessly, giving him space to find his way before bringing the piece back to its proper rhythm. By the time they finished the first run-through, Thomas was looking at Sophia with new respect. "That was really good," he said, sounding surprised at his own words. "You play beautifully," Sophia replied. "Your tone in the middle section is especially lovely." Thomas straightened a bit at the compliment. "Should we try it again? I think I rushed the transition at measure 24. "Of course," Sophia said, her fingers already poised over the keys. "This time, take all the space you need there. I'll follow you." Eleanor watched from the corner, a strange mixture of emotions washing over her. She had taught Thomas for 3 years, pushing him relentlessly toward technical perfection. Yet in 20 minutes with Sophia, his playing already showed more musicality than she had managed to extract in all that time. The rehearsal continued for an hour, with Thomas growing more confident with each run-through. By the end, the 2 other faculty members had been joined by several students in the hallway, all listening with undisguised interest. "That's enough for today," Eleanor announced, checking her watch. "Thomas, practice those fingerings we discussed for tomorrow. Ms. Mendez, you'll be working with Lily on the Saint-Saëns at 4:30. As Thomas packed up his violin, he paused beside the piano. "Thank you, Ms. Mendez, that was really helpful," Sophia smiled. "Thank you for playing so wonderfully. We'll impress everyone at the gala." After Thomas left, Eleanor approached the piano. "That went well," she said, trying to keep her tone professional despite her amazement at how quickly Sophia had adapted. "He's talented," Sophia replied, organizing her sheet music. "A bit tense in his upper body, which affects his vibrato, but nothing that can't be fixed with time." Eleanor nodded, recognizing the accurate assessment. "I've been telling him that for years. Sometimes hearing it from someone new helps," Sophia said with a small shrug. Fresh ears. An awkward silence fell between them. Eleanor found herself wanting to ask Sophia more about her training, her experiences performing, all the things that had made her the musician she clearly was. But the studio door opened as Lily, a young cellist, arrived for her rehearsal, and the moment passed. Throughout the afternoon, Sophia worked with 4 different students, each time showing the same combination of technical excellence and sensitive musicianship. By evening, the news had reached Director Chen, who made a point of stopping by to listen to the final rehearsal. Remarkable, he murmured to Eleanor as they stood in the back of the studio. Where did you find her? Eleanor hesitated. She works here, Paul. She's part of the cleaning staff. Paul's eyebrows shot up. The cleaning staff? But she plays like a concert pianist. She was one, Eleanor said quietly, in Venezuela, before she had to leave. Understanding dawned on Paul's face. A refugee situation. Eleanor nodded. She hasn't had regular access to a piano in years. What you're hearing is pure talent and training that was interrupted. Paul watched Sophia guide a nervous flutist through a difficult passage, her hands creating a perfect foundation for the student's wavering melody. We might need to rethink her position here, he said thoughtfully. The rehearsals continued over the next few days. Sophia arrived early each morning, completed her cleaning duties, then changed clothes and transformed into the academy's accompanist for the afternoon. The students quickly grew to respect her, many staying after their scheduled times to ask for additional help or simply to watch her work with others. Eleanor found herself lingering too, observing Sophia's methods. There was a gentleness to her teaching that Eleanor had never mastered, a way of correcting mistakes that left students feeling encouraged rather than criticized. Yet Sophia never lowered her standards or accepted mediocre playing. Somehow she managed to be both kind and demanding. On Thursday afternoon, after the last student had left, Eleanor found Sophia alone in the practice room, playing a piece Eleanor didn't immediately recognize, something contemporary with complex rhythms and jazz-like harmonies. That's not on the gala program, Eleanor said from the doorway. Sophia's hands stilled on the keys. No, just something I used to play. For myself. It's beautiful. Who's the composer? Sophia hesitated. I am. Eleanor tried to hide her surprise. You compose as well? I used to, Sophia said, closing the piano gently. Another luxury I gave up when we left Venezuela. Eleanor stepped further into the room. You haven't lost your touch at playing or composing. Thank you. Sophia gathered her things, seeming uncomfortable with the praise. The students are well prepared for tomorrow. They'll do the academy proud. Because of you, Eleanor said, the words coming out more forcefully than she'd intended. You've accomplished more with them in a week than I have in months. Sophia looked up, surprised by the admission. That's not true. They're well trained. You've given them a solid foundation. A foundation of technique, yes, but you've given them something else. Something I'm not sure I know how to teach anymore. Eleanor sat down on a nearby chair, suddenly feeling every one of her 60-plus years. When did music become just notes on a page for me? Just technique to be mastered? Sophia watched her carefully. Teaching is different from performing. When all your energy goes into helping others play well, sometimes your own connection to the music changes. Is that what happened to you, when you couldn't play anymore? Sophia shook her head. No, for me the music never left. It just went quiet for a while. She touched the piano keys lightly, not pressing down enough to make a sound. Even when I cleaned these rooms, I heard the music in my head. Every piece being played, I played along silently. Eleanor thought about this, about Sophia moving through the academy with music constantly in her mind, unable to express it. Something twisted painfully in her chest. What will you do after the gala? She asked. Sophia picked up her bag. Go back to cleaning, I suppose. And the music will go quiet again? Sophia gave a small, sad smile. Perhaps not as quiet as before. You've allowed me back into this world even if just for a week. That's a gift I won't forget. She headed for the door, but Eleanor couldn't let the conversation end there. What if it didn't have to be just for a week? Sophia paused, her hand on the doorknob. What do you mean? The academy needs a regular accompanist. Andrea was planning to retire next year anyway. And we need more help in the beginner piano department. Eleanor stood, warming to the idea as she spoke. Your credentials might not be recognized here formally, but your skill is undeniable. Director Chen was impressed. Sophia turned back, her expression cautious as if afraid to hope. Are you offering me a job? As a musician, not a cleaner? I'm suggesting the possibility, Eleanor said carefully. After the gala, if things go well, I believe it could be arranged. For a moment, Sophia said nothing. Then quietly, why would you do this for me? It was a fair question, and one Eleanor had been asking herself. Why did she care what happened to this woman? Why was she suddenly invested in Sophia's future? Because talent like yours shouldn't be silenced, she said finally. Because music needs you as much as you need it. And because perhaps I've forgotten what it means to play with joy instead of precision. You've reminded me. Sophia's eyes glistened slightly. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. The simple phrase hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement that went beyond musical ability to something more fundamental. To be seen, truly seen, after years of invisibility. The gala starts at 7 tomorrow, Eleanor said, returning to practica. Matters. Dress rehearsal at 2. Black formal wear for the performance, Sophia nodded, composing herself. I'll be ready. She hesitated, then added, My mother will be in the audience. I told her I'd be playing. She cried. The image of Sophia's mother hearing that her daughter would return to the piano after 8 years of silence struck Eleanor deeply. We'll make sure she has a seat in the front row, she promised. The evening of the donor gala arrived with a crisp autumn chill in the air. Thornfield Academy's historic building was transformed for the occasion. Warm lighting bathed the stone facade. Valet parking attendants in formal attire greeted arriving guests, and inside, flower arrangements and champagne stations created an atmosphere of elegant celebration. Eleanor arrived early, as was her habit for all Academy events. She wore her best black dress, simple but expensive, with a strand of pearls that had been her mother's. She supervised the final preparations in the recital hall, checking the lighting, the placement of the piano, the programs laid carefully on each seat. At 6:30, she slipped backstage to check on the students. They were gathering in the green room, dressed in their concert best, instruments in hand. Some looked nervous, others excited. Thomas, in a well-tailored suit that spoke of his family's wealth, was practicing a difficult passage, his brow furrowed in concentration. Where's Ms. Mendez? Eleanor asked, not seeing Sophia among the group. Practicing in Studio 3, Lily, the young cellist, replied. She said she needed a few minutes alone before the performance. Eleanor nodded and made her way down the quiet hallway to Studio 3. The door was partially open, and through the gap she could see Sophia seated at the piano. She wore a simple but elegant black gown, borrowed or rented, Eleanor guessed, but perfectly suitable for the occasion. Her hair was swept up in a more formal style than Eleanor had seen before, revealing the graceful line of her neck as she bent over the keys. Sophia wasn't playing, though. Her hands rested on the keyboard, but she seemed lost in thought, her eyes closed. Her breathing deliberate and slow, Eleanor recognized the pre-performance ritual, the centering of mind and body, the mental preparation that professional musicians often develop. She was about to step away, not wanting to interrupt, when Sophia spoke without opening her eyes. I'm ready, Professor Winters. Just collecting myself. Eleanor pushed the door open wider. How did you know it was me? Sophia smiled slightly, eyes still closed. Your perfume. Subtle but distinctive. She opened her eyes then and turned on the bench. Is it time? Almost. The students are ready. The hall is nearly full. Eleanor paused, then added, I saw an older woman being escorted to the front row. She had your eyes. Sophia's expression softened. My mother. She hasn't heard me play in 8 years. Something in her voice made Eleanor ask, Are you nervous? Sophia considered the question seriously. Not about playing. My fingers remember what to do. She looked down at her hands, turning them palm up as if examining old friends. I'm nervous about becoming her again, the person I was when music was my life. And who was that person? Eleanor asked quietly. Someone who believed anything was possible. Sophia stood, smoothing her gown. Someone who took joy for granted. The simple honesty of the statement struck Eleanor deeply. How many of her own students had she pushed toward perfection at the expense of joy? How long had it been since she herself had played for the pure pleasure of it, rather than to demonstrate technique or correct a student? Well, Eleanor said, not quite trusting her voice with more. It's time to remind that person she still exists. They walked together to the recital hall, where the buzz of conversation from the gathered donors created a gentle hum of anticipation. The Academy's supporters were an influential group, wealthy alumni, local business leaders, arts patrons, and parents of current students. Governor Wilson sat in the center of the second row, his security detail trying to be inconspicuous along the side walls. Director Chen greeted them backstage. Full house, he said, looking pleased. Every major donor in the region is out there, plus some new faces. He turned to Sophia. No pressure, Ms. Mendez, but this is the most important fundraising event of our year. Sophia nodded calmly. The students are well prepared. They'll do wonderfully. Eleanor watched as Sophia spoke quietly with each student before they went on stage, offering a word of encouragement, a reminder about a particular passage, or simply a reassuring smile. Thomas was first to perform, and as he waited in the wings, violin in hand, Sophia touched his arm lightly. "Remember to breathe," she told him. "The music breathes with you." He nodded, looking less nervous than Eleanor had ever seen him before a performance. Director Chen stepped onto the stage to welcome the audience and introduce the evening's program. Then Thomas walked out, followed by Sophia, who took her place at the piano with a quiet grace that immediately commanded attention. From the first notes of the Rachmaninoff vocalese, it was clear this would be no ordinary student recital. Thomas played with newfound confidence, his tone rich and expressive. But it was Sophia who transformed the performance, her accompaniment elevating his playing, supporting him when he faltered slightly, guiding him back to the heart of the music. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Eleanor, watching from the wings, saw Governor Wilson lean forward in his seat, his usual political smile replaced by genuine appreciation. In the front row, Sophia's mother wiped tears from her eyes. Each student who followed seemed inspired to new heights. Lily's cello sang with passion in the Saint-Saëns. The young flutist's Paganini caprice sparkled with playful energy. And through it all, Sophia's piano provided the foundation, the musical landscape upon which each young performer could shine. During intermission, Eleanor overheard donors talking excitedly about the extraordinary accompanist and, "Where has she been hiding?" Several approached Director Chen, checkbooks metaphorically in hand, impressed by the caliber of music the Academy was producing. The second half of the program featured more advanced students performing more challenging pieces. Sophia handled each one with the same musical sensitivity and technical brilliance. For the final piece of the evening, Thomas returned to perform a Beethoven sonata, the most demanding work on the program. As they played the final movement, Eleanor found herself holding her breath. Thomas had struggled with this piece for months, the complex interplay between violin and piano often throwing him off balance. But tonight, with Sophia as his partner, he played as Eleanor had always known he could, with both technical accuracy and emotional depth. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence in the hall. Then the audience erupted in applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Thomas beamed with surprise and pride. Sophia stood beside him, acknowledging the applause with a modest bow, her eyes finding her mother in the front row. The reception that followed was buzzing with enthusiasm. Donors surrounded Director Chen, many increasing their annual pledges on the spot. Governor Wilson made a point of congratulating Thomas, his son, while also expressing interest in the remarkable pianist. Eleanor found Sophia in a quiet corner, a glass of water in her hand, looking slightly overwhelmed by the attention. "You were magnificent," Eleanor said simply. "Thank you." Sophia's eyes shone with emotion. It felt like coming home, being on stage again. "I spoke with Paul, Director Chen," Eleanor said. "The board has authorized a new position, assistant piano instructor and staff accompanist. He'd like to offer it to you starting next month." Sophia's hand trembled slightly, water sloshing in her glass. "A real teaching position?" Eleanor nodded. "With access to the pianos whenever you need them. And no more cleaning duties." Sophia looked across the room to where her mother stood, proudly accepting compliments about her daughter from people who, a week ago, wouldn't have noticed either of them. "Why are you doing this for me?" Sophia asked, echoing her question from the day before. This time, Eleanor had a clearer answer. "Because I was wrong," she said simply. "I judged you by your circumstances, not your abilities. I forgot that great music can come from anywhere, from anyone who has the gift and has done the work." She paused, then added more softly, "And because you've reminded me what I've been missing in my teaching, the joy of music. Not just the technique." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Eleanor replied. "Now there are about 20 donors who want to meet you, and at least 5 students who suddenly want to learn piano instead of their current instruments." Sophia laughed, wiping her eyes. "I should go speak with them." As Sophia moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions, Eleanor found herself approached by Thomas's father. "The governor, Professor Winters," he said, shaking her hand firmly. That was quite a performance. "Thomas has never played so well." "He's a talented young man," Eleanor replied diplomatically. "Yes, but there was something different tonight." The governor glanced toward Sophia, who was now speaking with Director Chen. "Your new pianist brought something special out of him." "Out of all your students, actually." Eleanor nodded. "She has a gift for teaching, not just playing. Well, whatever she's doing, it's working. Thomas actually practiced voluntarily this week, a miracle in our household." He lowered his voice slightly. "Paul tells me she was working as part of your cleaning staff. Quite a discovery." "A reminder, actually," Eleanor corrected gently. "That talent doesn't always come in the packages we expect. Sometimes we need to look past titles and positions to see the person underneath." Later that evening, after the last guests had departed and the students had gone home filled with the satisfaction of successful performances, Eleanor found herself alone in the recital hall. The flowers had been removed, the chairs straightened, the piano closed for the night. Only the ghost light on the stage remained illuminated, casting long shadows across the empty space. She sat at the piano and lifted the cover, her fingers finding the keys in the dim light. It had been years since she had played for herself, not just to demonstrate techniques for students. The demands of teaching, of administration, of maintaining the academy's reputation had slowly pushed her own musicianship into the background. Quietly, she began to play the Chopin nocturne she had heard Sophia play that night weeks ago. Her technique was still solid, but as she played, she listened differently, not for mistakes or technical flaws, but for the emotion, the story within the music. A slight sound made her look up. Sophia stood in the doorway, her evening gown exchanged for simple street clothes, her mother waiting patiently behind her. "Don't stop," Sophia said softly. "It's beautiful." Eleanor's hand stilled on the keys. "I'm out of practice." "Not in the ways that matter," Sophia replied. She stepped into the room, her mother following. "Professor Winters, this is my mother, Isabel Mendez." The older woman stepped forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said, her accent thicker than her daughter's, "for giving my Sophia back her music." Eleanor shook her head. "Sophia never lost her music. The rest of us just weren't listening properly." She stood and offered her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Mendez. Your daughter will be a wonderful addition to our faculty." As they said their goodnights and Sophia led her mother toward the exit, Eleanor called after them. "Sophia, 9 o'clock Monday morning. We'll need to discuss your teaching schedule." Sophia turned back, a smile illuminating her face. "I'll be here. But not with a mop this time." "No," Eleanor agreed, returning the smile. "This time bring your music."